Well, hey gang, howdy. Just wanted to put a little video together here, talk at you for a few minutes about assignments and like what we have coming up, and maybe a little bit about like how to think about the assignments and how to approach them. I'm wrapping up the grading finally for the first analysis paper, and a couple things to mention here. And I should say I fully get how this happened. I think there was maybe some ambiguity in terms of this business of like two analysis papers, but there's also options. And so I had a couple of students who did both of the options for the first paper, but kind of did them halfway. But I understand that it might have seemed as though you had to write two papers, and so some of you thought that that meant both of the options for the first paper. So just to clarify, yes, there are two analysis paper assignments in this class. The first one I'm just finishing grading. The second one's coming up May 4. Okay, so two different papers. And what I did here is, this is only the second time I've taught this class in its kind of current form. And the first time I taught it was in a summer, maybe 2 summers ago. And so what I did is I had, for each of the 5 modules of content, I had one paper assignment, one analysis paper assignment. And so the students wrote 5 short papers throughout the class. When I created this version of the class, I added additional assignments. And so instead of having you write 5 module papers, I decided to just shrink that down to 2 papers. But I had all of these nice paper ideas. I had 5 paper ideas from the previous time I taught this class. And so I decided to use those ideas and give you options. And so the first analysis paper had 2 options. I don't know if you noticed this, but one of the options was pertaining to the first module on argumentation. That was Brock Reedy. And then the second option was on the second module having to do with like symbolic action and Kenneth Burke, right? So that was the idea there, is like for the first paper, you can write on basically the first module stuff or the second module stuff. You choose, and most of you did that. Some of you got a little lost. So then for the second paper, which again is coming up in May, the second analysis paper, there I have 3 options because that's module 3, 4, and 5. Okay, and so there you're going to have 3 choices. But please just again write one paper, choose one of those options. So it's kind of again focusing on like, did you enjoy the module 3 stuff, which was, we just finished it, and that was agitation, right? Public sphere type stuff, advocacy, and so on. Or maybe you preferred the stuff that we're doing right now, rhetoric as social power, right? So ideology, and then the feminist kind of critique of rhetoric, that's right now, that's beyond persuasion. And then next week is like creating space, it has to do with identity and ethnicity. And then the final module is on virtuality, and that's like technology and the digital stuff. So your second analysis paper, again, coming up, is going to have options based on the different modules. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, with respect to the papers that you just wrote and will be writing again, and the show and tell, which is actually the next assignment, I pushed that from the 13th to the 20th. And that's a video that you're going to submit. And it's basically like we used to do this when I was a little boy. We would come to school, bring something from home that you find fascinating and you think it's exciting and weird or whatever. Show it and tell. So you show it to your classmates and you talk about this thing. And so, I want you to try to get better at talking about rhetoric and using the language of rhetoric and identifying rhetoric around you and sort of understanding how the world around you is rhetorical. And so the assignment on the show and tell is basically find some rhetorical phenomena in the media and present it using some of the theory that we've been working through. And that gets me to my next kind of comment or point here, which is I really enjoyed have been enjoying going through the the papers on Brock Reedy, on the arguers as lovers. And there was a lot of really interesting examples. And there was some use of Brock Reedy, but there was kind of a range here. So I wanted to just mention like how to think about all of the assignments, and I would argue, all of the assignments that you do in any class is that you want to try to make arguments, right? And so, for instance, in the Brock Reedy paper, if you're making the case that this example is an example of a seducer, for instance, you're making an argument. You're trying to convince your reader that this example exemplifies these concepts, these elements, right? And so here I just think about Toulmin. Argument involves the claim, the assertion, the support for the assertion, or your data or your support, your evidence, and then the warrant, which I just think of as like the explanation, right? How everything goes together. So that's how you want to be thinking about when you are saying that something is rhetorical, or you're saying that something is a seducer or a lover or whatever. You are trying to show, you're trying to convince, you're being rhetorical essentially, right? And so the way to think about that is you're making your assertion that here is an example of a seducer, a rapist, or a lover. That's your claim essentially. Then now your support for that is, well, okay, so how do I know? How do you convince me? First thing you want to do is establish your kind of authority, and that's where you bring in the example, the theory. So that's the Brock Reedy. So go into the reading, see what Brock Reedy says about seducer, about rapist, whatever. That he breaks it down pretty clearly in terms of like how it is that the speaker thinks about the audience, right? And the kinds of tactics that they use and so on and so on. And you can just kind of like jot that down, bring it in, and now there's the kind of the important conceptual elements of the theory that are informing your analysis. And so what you're now saying is this example has these qualities of this thing that we just talked about in terms of the theory, and now you're just connecting dots, right? So this is this showing it. That's Aristotle says we are most persuaded when we believe something to have demonstrated. So you're demonstrating how it is that something is the thing that you're saying it is, right? And that involves the theory and the example and then making those connections. So some of you did that really well. Some of you did sort of one part of it more than the other part. And I didn't really sort of state this, explicitly, but I just figured I would follow up and say this is a good way of thinking about, working through these examples. Because some of you went hard on Brock Reedy and kind of sort of slighted the example, and some of you went really hard on the example and slighted the theory. So it's nice to have both and then focusing on those connections. All right, so I wanted to just clarify the analysis paper stuff and then just talk a little bit about that, like how to be rhetorical and therefore persuasive in your assignments. And this is just a gift in terms of like all the work that you do. You're being rhetorical. You're always trying to persuade your professor that you know what you're talking about, right? So that means bringing in the theory, demonstrating that you understand the theory, and then showing that you can sort of connect it to the world through examples. And then demonstrating that you understand, that this element of the theory is what we're seeing going on right here. This disregard for the audience is very obvious because we see that this person is doing this and this and this. All right. So maybe that's obvious to you, but I just figured I would say it a little bit in terms of what I'm looking for and where I find myself most persuaded by what I'm reading. Okay, but I did want to say that I love a lot of what you guys are doing, and the ideas are popping, and there's some excitement and enthusiasm, and it's really cool. So keep at it. And if you haven't been in class for a while and you want to come back, you want some stimulating conversation, there's been a really lovely energy in the classroom lately. And I feel like we're having fun and we're learning good stuff. So everyone's welcome to come on by, say hi. Participate. We'd love to have you. All right. Hope everyone's well. Talk soon.